Hey James, how's it going?
Great, great. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good.
Um, yeah, it's a new year. New Systems Academy cohort is getting ready to start, and just thinking about some things that you might suggest for them to think about for the upcoming year, or reflections maybe on our cohort from last year, and the things that they did, which were uniquely successful for them, or the things that others might do to maintain that kind of success this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great question. I think the number one thing is with anything you do, you get out of it what you put in. And when we really think about Systems Academy, it's really not a secret. There's nothing that's really, I'd say, secretive about the information. 90%, if not more, of what we're going to talk about, if from the trading standpoint, is breakouts and second legs. You can find it in nows, you can find it in now leads. But aside from that, I think that the biggest takeaways, what I saw people do really, really well, and then what I saw people really struggle with, the ones that really dedicated their pursuit in Systems Academy to one idea, 3 bar micro channel, something, and they really went down the rabbit hole of figuring out all the nuances. And the nuances go really, really deep. I mean, there are just, when you think of a variation of a 3 bar micro channel, there are so many different factors. And the ones that did well committed to that one thing. And the ones that struggled necessarily, they had an idea and it may not have been a bad idea, but they struggled with pursuing down that path, having the discipline to really follow through with it. And, again, it's really what I would say, if there's two traits for Systems Academy or really system design, it's really being willing to commit to one idea and see it to the end. And there were students that did a really good job with that. And there were other students who didn't do as well with that. But the interesting thing overall, I would say, is the ones that committed to showing up and, willing to be there through the frustrations. Some of them that were, they did a little well in the beginning, started to fall down halfway through and they struggled. Towards the end, they started to get a little rebounding because they started to build a little bit more discipline and a little bit more willingness to say, okay, I know I don't want to trade this system, but I know that breakouts and second legs are important, and therefore I'm going to really follow the process and figure it out. And I was talking
Mm.
with some people today in last year's Systems Academy. Even though the market's closed, there's 4 or 5 of them on a Zoom call that are trying to learn more about breakouts and second legs. And I'd say one of the most important things with the class, those of you that are going to be joining us or those of you that are thinking about it, is it's an opportunity to really take time to meet like-minded individuals and really study together. But at the end of the day, it's not that there's anything secretive about the information that's in Systems Academy. The ones that did really, really well, they understood that it's a year-long program and they gave it their very best effort. And they held themselves accountable to actually going through the process and doing the work. The ones that did really well, if they couldn't make it to every video call, they were always asking questions or they were always sending reports. So James, I'll fire it back to you. What are things you saw?
Yeah, I mean, all of those are kind of the major categories of like the successful SA2 student and system developer in general. One of the interesting things that you said was the all of the nuances and variations. And we have a exemplary student in PTM who's always helping out and who's a music conductor, and he describes it as the all of the variations. Like if you think about a piece of classical music, is theme and variation. And so if your theme is breakout and follow through, how many variations does a breakout and follow through have? I mean, that is the thing that you're actually developing the system for. You're not developing it for the theme, you're developing it for the variations. And so you need to figure out how to organize all of your information, all of your research and ideas to account for the variability within that variation data set. And so the thing that I found, like you just said, that was probably the most significant marker of success was the amount of time that. So there were two categories. the amount of time that people spent either reviewing the recorded videos, because I had a number of students who did the entire program asynchronously, and
Same
then
here.
sent
And
and,
just
and then sent
without
the videos, or sorry, sent their reports. And the reports were basically our mode of communication, but rather than being in every class live, they would watch each video 3 or 4 times, right? Each coaching session 3 or
absolutely
4 times. And that was like, so it's either being in the sessions live and really actively participating, or spending a lot of time thinking about the coaching session asynchronously.
100%. And I think you could say those that did really well, they put in the work. And it wasn't so much, even if we both have, I believe, had a couple of students who didn't even live in the US, time zones were very difficult. They made it when they could, but they definitely watched the recordings. And, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
a very good way to put it. And so, James, I think, want to kind of reiterate one of the things that I think you're saying is you can take an idea like a 3-bar microchannel setup. And when we think about the filters, it's not that hard. You got to know the leg count. You got to know the context. But just because you understand those two things, how many variations of a 3-bar microchannel can you really get? And the question really becomes, how does one go about being able to understand all those variations? Would you say that's the challenging part?
I mean, that's the challenging part of developing a system, is understanding, and so it's first, and this is actually one of the reasons why I developed the context analysis dashboard, because that's not for the setup and signal research, but rather context research. And this gets to that larger question of how to conduct research. I mean, if you don't have a lot of experience conducting research, or you haven't done it in a long time, like if you're a returning student who's worked professionally for 20 years, and that's a lot of our cohort are professionals who have been, working in the field and may not have done a research study for the last 10 years. Maybe they have, employees who do research, for them. Just organizing that to be, coherent and useful and not actually end up costing you time later in the research and system development process is a major component. And so, again, like you said, these are all things that are, the information is available to the public. There's nothing secret. Ali has, done a remarkable job of organizing everything into a, the course, the course modules and the course information, so that you don't have to go out and read 300 books, right? So that part of it has been, pre-digested, and the most useful parts of it are already, presented there. But then from that, you also have to go, follow through and do, employ good research practices, good data analysis practices. And at each of those steps, there's substantial room for miscalculation. There's students in every cohort who will, submit a progress report and will have miscalculated, some of their metrics. And then they'll go back and say, "Oh, I was including this in there. I shouldn't have included. I was including break-even trades in, my profit factor, right?" And so, how do I want to account for break-even trades? And if I'm still paying fees, like there are a number of nuances that you need to be able to understand. Just how you're doing all of your system calculations when you're doing your data analysis. And so these are the things where someone might get tripped up otherwise. Someone trying to do system development on their own may never notice them. I mean, there's a lot of just research pedagogy that is important to maintain. There's a lot of common, it's not as much of an issue here, but in research in general, there's a lot of common mistakes that mislead people to believe that their data is much better than it is. And that's one of the things that I think every SA2 student identifies pretty early on, just how the data collection will work most usefully for them. And we've developed a number of tools to help them. I've written some scripts for TradingView to help people export the data that they need from the indicators that we provide. So like there's definitely some things that will help that research process and the data collection process. But it's still a long and ongoing endeavor.
And so one of those, when we think about the research or the tools, one thing to think about is it happens all the time. Let's take when you're trading an idea. You take an idea, whether it's a 3-bar microchannel, breakout, and follow through. Usually, any idea is going to come down to a few filters in it that are going to be most important. And maybe that's the leg count, maybe it's the context, and the tweaking of those filters can really make or break a system. You might have a system that's very much break even, and if you could fix one of those filters, like the leg count, and better understand it, you might be able to increase how profitable it is, maybe 15%, and that would be a really, really big number. And so the point with that is, James, let's give them, like, everyone kind of an actionable approach, even if they're not ready for Systems Academy or they have no interest in joining. Let's talk about for a second this idea of system design. One of the biggest challenges that I think I hear what you're saying, and it's certainly what I believe, is when you're building any idea, number one, you have to know what you're doing as far as building it, and you have to know what is needed for it. But the other thing is you got to know how to look at the data. If there's a series of losing trades, what is the reason for these losing trades? What's the most important thing to fix? Is this actual legitimate back-tested data, or is there too much hindsight is 2020 mentality where it's not going to line up in real trading? And the hard part is you've really got to have, somebody or a group of people to look over. So if you're going to go at it alone, I think it's really, really important to find others like-minded that are willing to do a similar thing and really learn an idea so you can bounce back and forth. Like I said, I was talking earlier with some people who were in Systems Academy last year, and I mean, they were really, really talking about breakouts for about 4 hours. And they're really kind of going over ideas and really thinking as far as, really comparing. They're comparing their notes. They're thinking about breakouts and second legs, and they're actually verifying with the 4 or 5 of them, does this actually make sense? And really, they have their hypothesis, and they're trying to prove to each other, is this true? And you can do the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing when you're studying Al's video course or you're studying Ali. You're asking the question of why. Why does Al say, why do you get a double top? And if I'm looking at thinking why the market gets 2 legs, but I don't have anyone to discuss that with, it's going to take me longer. But if I've got someone like James who I can directly ask questions to, or I've got a peer who I'm studying with, when I don't understand something, I can directly ask them. And that it's the classic mentality of when you can talk through a subject, you're going to learn it faster. As opposed to if you're a musician, since James, you like music, if you're completely on your own and you can't talk to other musicians, it's going to be a lot harder.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that, there are a subset of people who can do it on their own and who have the discipline and research experience and, can manage that entire process on their own.
Is it fair to say there's probably a lot of people, but the question is, how much time are they willing to spend to get to the end goal?
Yeah. So even that's a good point. So for those who can manage it on their own and who do have the experience and discipline to do it, might it be, substantially shorter working in a group, of students who are all working towards the same goal? That's almost certainly going to be true. I do know people who've developed robust systems on their own. It's not like it can't be done. I think the question is, again, if you don't have experience and you aren't sure where to begin, or you have some inkling of where to begin, then I think it becomes a bit more difficult to make consistent progress towards the goal of having a system that you can deploy in the market. Now, again, it's the variability that becomes the challenge. It's not the theme, because we all know. I mean, if we watch Al's video course, I mean, we know what all of the signals are. Everything is there. There's no mystery. Ali teaches it differently, and we have years of PTM recordings that people can watch. It's all there.
There's why is it so? And James, I'm going to interrupt, but I have to ask the question: if it's all there, why is it so difficult?
Because it takes first, it's a matter of the individual research, and this is why and actually why Ali stresses this in PTM. What are your beliefs? right? If you don't believe this is why it's very uncommon that someone can trade someone else's system. The systems you develop are based on your beliefs about the market, and you have to start from that. It's why the first page of our system documentation accounts for the beliefs the system is based upon, right? So starting from that premise, everyone really needs to do the work themselves. This is why Ali wrote hundreds and hundreds of his own indicators and did, reams of studies to support the things and prove to himself that the things Al was saying were true. He did that. And, much of his work is based upon those principles, and he has made them his own. And he, has done a lot of exemplary teaching around that. And I think that shows, how you can really take something and, make it your own. And find the way that it makes most sense for you to articulate those principles. But you can't do that if you haven't proven it to yourself. And that's where the research comes in. That's where the study comes in. And it's very difficult work. Now, can folks do it? Of course, anyone can do it. It's just a matter of time and discipline. And so there's a lot of tools that we use in SA2 that help with that. We have workflows that, that also help with that. But it's also just exposure. Brad, you told me, I didn't realize this, that, in marketing, for example, it takes 20 interactions minimum.
34, 20 to 34 interactions.
Yeah, to have like a conversion, for someone's interest in to actually, purchase something. We're not hard sellers here, so we don't take that approach. But like the interesting thing is just the amount of exposure someone needs to an idea before they integrate it. And one of my most interesting experiences towards the end of Systems Academy was actually with one of my students who developed, I think, definitely 3, arguably 4 complete systems last year. And we were doing some optimization at the end. And I had proposed an idea a number of times, and he said he's going to look into it. And then I got messages from him last week, the week before, that is like, I finally did it. I did the research. It's like, that was a great idea. I've changed the way that I'm dealing with this one entry package around this one expression of the signal, and it has changed the way that all of those trades operate. But
how many times did you hint at that person to do that?
Well, we had talked about it a half dozen times at least.
And it finally clicked.
And yeah, it finally clicked. And he finally did the research to support it. And now that idea is his own, and he can fully account for why he should be operating in that, in that manner for that particular expression of that particular signal. And now it's just part of his system, or that system.
And I want to say something with it. It's the same thing when you're studying Al's video course. I think the number one mistake people make is they watch the course once and they think that that's it. The more you watch something, the more your thinking starts to evolve. And the more times you hear the conversation, you think about it a little differently, and that kind of triggers a light bulb. And then you go back to the idea and you think about it a little differently. And before you know it, you have a really deep understanding of it. And so James's whole point is like, let's take second legs or leg counting. I think we probably talked about leg counting in every session. In some regard. And when you hear a topic and you hear something that's stressed and the important, I mean, leg counting is extremely important. And the simple answer is if it's leg 1, it's most important. If it's leg 3, it's probably going to pull back. But the amount of times we reinforce that idea, it almost gets to a point where it's kind of brainwashing. And so what you have to do with Al's video course is you've got to go through it and really understand those key components. If you go to Al's books, he says the single most important decision a trader can make is understanding, is the breakout above or below the bar going to succeed or fail? So what Al's saying is breakouts are most important. And that's no different than what we're saying in class. The difference is when you hear the conversation discussed over and over and over, then there's a benefit to that. That's why so many people like Ali's PTM, because even though it's the same, James, I think it restarts every probably 6 months, 7 months,
roughly.
Roughly, they like it because it's the same content over and over, but it's a new, you get a new part of the monthly charts coming in or something. The past 2 or 3 months was more bullish or less bullish. There's different phases of the market cycle in the daily chart. And so they get to hear the same topic, and they also get to hear Ali talk about it in different ways. That's the whole point of any sort of, call it cohort learning module or learning together. When it's a classroom environment, it sparks questions. The amount of times we had in it someone present a project idea or think about an idea, break out in second leg. And someone else the next class would come in and say, well, wait a second, I was thinking about what this person said, and now this changed my viewpoint. Can we talk about this? And so the point is, with any trading, you can certainly take Al's course and learn an entirety about it. The point is, I think one of the big mistakes people do with trading is they think about someone like Al and his information, and they say, oh, I'm just going to watch Al's course in a year and I'm going to be him. When the reality is, you're basically thinking about someone who's been thinking about a topic for 30 years. So they've had these cycles of trading just over and over and over in terms of thinking. And so the hardest part with trading, especially if you're doing this by yourself, the single most challenging part is, do you have the discipline and the motivation to continuously think about a subject over and over and over by yourself? And, that's just reality. It's a lot more fun to talk about trading when you can talk with others. And that doesn't even have to be in Systems Academy. My whole point is, either join Systems Academy. If you don't want to do that, find a group of people studying Ali, studying Al, that you think are motivated, that are worth, putting a lot of time in, and really put the time in to learn together, because you will learn faster. And so the more experience you have in a room, the more time speeds up. And it's not the same for everybody. But that's really, a big piece.
But you bring up an important point. If you're talking, so justifying things to yourself is different than explaining it to others. I taught for 10 years before I taught a cohort of Systems Academy. And I explained, I remember I taught literature. And so, I remember the first time I taught, one of my favorite books, the James Joyce book, Dubliners, his short stories, or the first time I taught Huck Finn. Both of them, you're kind of figuring out how to, deal with some of the ideas and how to handle the conversations that come up with it. But the more time you spend with the books, and I had read those books hundreds of times by the time I taught them, the way that you interact with material and you deal with it when you have to explain it versus just think about it by yourself is entirely different. So explaining and justifying your ideas and the principles of a system to a group of people who are thinking as critically as you about the same principles is entirely different than doing it by yourself. And that's really one of, I think, the unique benefits, and where you see the students who made the fastest progress. Not to say that students who weren't as active presenting, because there were a lot of students who didn't present in person, but who did phenomenal work. But the ones who would spend a lot of time developing presentations, I'm thinking of one student from my cohort who presented pretty regularly. The kind of progress that he made in his system development was pretty quick. And a lot of it was developing infrastructure to deploy his systems. But the idea is the same. The more you explain and justify your ideas, the more robust they become. It's the same principle of debate. If you can justify your idea, then it becomes more and more robust.
And James, one thing that makes me think about, it's kind of a funny story. I'll never forget it. Someone had a question, and it was kind of a group of individuals in SA2. And it was it was like right before the market closed or something. And they, one painting was like, hey, can I just ask a quick second? And I was like, yeah, sure, I got time. So I jumped on really quick. And there was, I'll never forget it. They know each other's system. There's 5 or 6 of them. They know exactly what each other's system is. And one of them, like, I don't remember what time, maybe 4 bars before the market closed, they said, I'm going to sell the close of this bar. And one of the people in that class immediately was like, hey, that's not your set. Like, why are you doing that? You just, you're supposed to do this, and you're not supposed to trade during this hour. and you just completely broke your trading rules. Like, that's not your system. And immediately called them out on it. And what they were explaining to me was what they actually ended up doing. They have something called TradeZilla, and basically a trading journal. And they would send, in this TradeZilla, it records the live trades, and they would actually send each other their results and categorize their trades based on their system. And then one person was telling me that one thing that they hated was they would take a bad trade knowing it was against their system, knowing they'd have to send that result to their, accountability partner, if you will. And he said it actually forced them to stop taking those kind of trades because they just didn't want to get called out, by Telegram or whatever the messaging they were using. And so
That's
it's
great.
really, one of the big things I think about what James is talking about is do you have the, can you internally critique your own work? Because it's really easy when you're building something to say, yeah, this is a good job, or I'm doing the right things. And then the second thing is, can you hold yourself accountable? It's a classic thing with, if I'm on simulated, I wouldn't take that trade because, whatever reason. And so it's really, really important, whether it's Systems Academy, whether it's something else, it's extremely important to basically understand to hold each other accountable. So have someone that you're working with hold you accountable and really, be willing to kind of hold the feet to the fire, because that's how you learn faster. It's just, it's more, it's just time and time again with anything.
Yeah. I mean, and my approach to all education is the value comes from learning things deeply. And so, and Ali has talked about the difficulty with trading is that there's many things that you have to learn. But if we approach things from first principles, that there's only a handful of first principles that you need to always keep in mind. And from there, all of the variations become myriad. And that's really where the challenge lies. But like you said, you start from breakouts and everything is downstream from there.
Absolutely.
But the greatest value is in knowing something deeply. And that's really where I saw the most benefit for system developers. Being able to really, really understand a single system gives you the lens through which to see everything else. Because if you see this one thing with absolute clarity and you can account for all of the variability and the nuances within that, then you can start to transfer that understanding to everything that surrounds it, right? Because in order to account for that one thing and all its variations, you also have to account for the context that the things surrounding it, contribute. And as a result, you start to really understand everything that surrounds it. So it's not just breakout and follow through. It's, variations. And that's the accumulated study and, subsequent research studies and iterations on studies. Like, the first system that I built was an I1R system, and I did 3 different research studies in order to build it. Complete research studies. So over 400 trades of study. And then all of that data went into the system. So, it's not one research study of 100 trades and you're done. And I had a really interesting student, one of my asynchronous students, who developed an interesting method for deciding which filter combinations to use when he was selecting deciding how he was going to configure his filters and the trade-offs he was making with them. Is he going to go for higher profit factor and lower trade frequency? Is he going to, be more active during this period of day or this period? Like, there were lots of different trade-offs that he was considering. And it was a really unique way of deciding how to organize the data that made sense to him. And then, basically just choosing, options 1 through 7 and deciding how to organize his filter configuration. And so it's really interesting.
You made an interesting point, because all we're doing is talking about, thinking through a setup or a system idea and then accounting for the nuances. But one thing we hadn't even talked about is, you mentioned, are they going to be the time availability? And that makes me think of kind of that objectives category. One thing when we're building any system, you have to think about, for one, what are the metrics in terms of one's availability of time to actually manage the system or manage the trade. And you have to think through those variables as far as, well, if I only have an hour to trade in the morning or 2 hours to trade in the morning, I had a student who was in Hong Kong, and therefore he only traded, I think, the first 3 hours. And so part of what he had to think about was what system, how can he manipulate his system to maybe scalp a little bit more in order to get a few trades in, but also not have to potentially hold through anything and be able to close the trade so he could go about his day. And so it's really, really important, just because you have a system idea, it may not meet for one, may not match your personality, but number two, it may not also match your availability of time.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of factors other than just understanding the nuance of the system that you've got to understand.
Yeah, and I think that might be a good topic for our next stream is talking about really the trade-offs that students have to make or system developers have to make when they're just first kind of weighing the options for what to use as their initial system inputs. Maybe we could just quickly answer Jim's question here. Jim said, what are you talking about? Or when you're talking about legs, how do you account for when the market consolidates? So, I mean, there's a variety of ways to do this. The most useful way that I found, and Brad, maybe this is similar to the way you handle it. If you're getting legs, and so typically when we refer to legs, we're referring to legs defined by spike breaks. So simple legs rather than complex legs. So a simple leg being a simple bull leg being higher lows until you have a lower low, and bear leg being lower highs until you have a higher high. And obviously there's some nuances that can result from that, like inside bars, and an outside bar followed by an inside bar, and then how do you count that as a bull or a bear leg? But leaving some of those really outside bar derived issues aside, which are the most difficult things to actually account for when trying to count legs. If you are finding if you're finding the market flipping between legs very frequently, and they're only 2 or 3 bar legs, then typically you're in breakout mode. And I've found, and actually I had students who tried to code leg counters, and it's a worthy exercise, but it is a very, very tall order. And it takes a long, long time. I think a much more useful exercise, rather than trying to write a leg counter, is just trying to draw something that identifies simple legs. Don't try to count them. Just try to identify where the simple legs exist, draw them properly. So draw like and
we call those spike breaks, right?
Spike breaks. Yeah. So simple legs defined by spike breaks. And then just if you're coding this, Jim, then what you can do is just track whether you have higher highs or lower lows, right? And because then you can, without having to count them, you can actually define patterns. And I think that's actually more useful than trying to count them, because counting introduces a whole bunch of nuances that they can quickly lead you to noodle soup, and just get, sticking with just doing simple higher highs and lower lows for your spike breaks. So did your bear leg create a lower low? Did your bull leg create a higher high? If not, then it's an inside leg. If it's an outside leg, then, different characteristics. So, and different patterns resulting from that. So Jim, the spike break is what we were referring to with, if you have higher lows and then you have a
trend line break.
Yeah, a trend line break
of the micro channel.
Exactly.
And just real quick, Jim, one of the things that people do, if you're confused, there's usually 2 things. If you're confused on the leg count, kind of as James said, it goes up a few bars, pulls back, go up a few bars, pulls back, go up a few bars. An easy thing to do is go to a higher time frame. So the way I think about it is this: when you start looking at, classic example, in consecutive buy climaxes in a tight bull channel, it's a wedge top there price itself. No, because if you look at a 15-minute chart, it's going to be a bull breakout. So to James's point, whenever you see, if you really want to see if a leg is truly major, really look at a higher time frame, because that leg 3 down on a higher time frame, if it's truly something really strong, it's going to be a leg 1 on a higher time frame. So when you see, 2-3 legs up in a, with a lot of overlap, and you go to a higher time frame, it's probably going to be a tight trading range, and therefore it's not as important. You want to see the overall kind of, call it market context, market regime, the overall always in direction. It's however you want to call it. You want to see the higher time frame leg count in that case. When does, and then so I hope that really answers your question.
And then when does SA2 start? So today, Ali is starting his cohort, and Brad and I should be starting in the next couple of weeks. We're completing some signups and onboarding, and then we'll be starting off in probably a week or two. And here we'll just hit the old soggy tomato. So the reversal and follow through is just defined by the reversal bars are bars that just change direction. So if you have in Ali's code, you have IBS is what defines bar direction. So if you have a bear bar and it's followed by a bull bar, that is a bull. So the bull bar is a reversal bar. If that bar gets follow through, then it's a reversal and follow through. And there's criteria that you would probably want to filter for that follow through bar. So is the follow through bar also a bull bar? What is the threshold for your IBS that you would consider to be follow through? Or are you just simply looking for a bull breakout? Or are you considering bull bars that close inside the reversal bar follow through? So there's a variety of ways that you would want to configure your parameters for the reversal and follow through, but that's the first principle.
And just to cover, this is an interesting, I think a good topic for us to talk about.
Oh,
go ahead, James. No, you're good. Go back to what yours.
We're going that was it. I was going to turn it off.
Oh, you're good. So John, will we be doing the SA2 next year? We think so. There's always the possibility that we do not. One of the things I wanted to say is this, about, if it's probably no secret about James, I or Ali, no one's really that hard pressed on pressing people to join. It's pretty, we keep it pretty simple. And, the biggest thing we ask is if you think that you might be interested, just go ahead and apply and just have a conversation with us. I mean, I've had plenty of conversations where someone's applied and we both just kind of said, maybe you should watch more of the video course, or here's an idea. Why don't you get Ali's PTM videos, think about breakouts and second legs for a little bit and go that route. I've had other people where, they really just wanted to better understand what SA2 was and talk about it. And I think that's kind of one of my frustrations overall with the world. And I get how it is. Nobody wants to sign up for something or give their phone number and all of a sudden get, 30 text messages a day about, hey, you should sign up for this product. And no one's here to do that. At the end of the day, when you think about SA2, and this is actually a benefit for everybody, we really want everyone who, for one, it's not a large group anyway. I think, James and I will probably have maybe 15 people for this year.
Yeah, probably.
And so we want the number to be really small. And so the point with that is it's a cohort. Everyone gets more value when everyone shows up and everyone's really energetic and really wants to learn. So at the end of the day, if someone's really not interested in joining SA2, we really don't want them to join in the first place, because that's going to bring down the rest of the group. So one of the things we really do measure, and we ask people all the time, even when we tell them that they're accepted, we really, heck, we've had people wait for 2 weeks to, we've told people before, give it a week or two and really decide if this is what you want. So, I mean, we really want people that are going to join to know that they want to join and not just be excited because they just talked about it. So, really, if you think that you want to talk about it or you have questions, we're more than happy to just talk about it. We're not really, like I said, we're not really big on, I think we like talking more about trading than really convincing people to do this.
Yeah,
so,
the conversation is the important part, because it's what really defines whether or not. And actually, if anyone goes back and watches some of our earliest streams, Brad, they'll see Trader Chick was commenting quite a bit on our videos.
Oh yeah.
And she asked at one point, should I sign up for PTM or SA2? And like we suggested, based on the conversation we had during that live stream, that PTM was probably a better choice.
And I believe she went to PTM, didn't she?
She's still,
She was there for a
I'm
while.
pretty sure
she might be there right now.
she might still be in there. I wasn't in the last stream, but
Yeah.
like she was, you know, one of the stalwarts of PTM and learned a ton and was doing, you know, she was trading the 15-minute chart and crushing it. So like, you know, SA2 isn't necessarily the right step for everyone, but it's hard to
Not at all.
understand whether it is unless we have a conversation about it. So it's worth always just, if you're thinking about it, it's worth submitting an application and having a conversation. Unless you are really pretty sure that right now is not the time. But
yeah, if it's right now is not time, then just certainly, you know,
Yeah.
consider PTM or watch more of the video course, look at
Exactly.
charts. Absolutely. And so as far as kind of an actionable, you know, James, what's something you could tell everyone, you know, what do we think we could tell everybody to do between now and the next time we talk? You know, what's an actionable thing they could do with their trading either over the weekend or today to just get a step further?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most important thing is to actively trade something that you like to trade. You know, don't trade breakout and follow through if that puts you in a position where you are managing trades that you don't like to manage. You know, I had a student in Systems Academy who built an entire system or did a significant amount of systems research on breakout and follow through and realized that it wasn't the system that made him feel most comfortable. Changed to reversal and follow through and was profitable from August until maybe July until December when, you know, we wrapped up Systems Academy. So, you know, the most important thing is that the system that you're developing or that you're actively trading fits your personality and your beliefs about the market. And so if anyone is struggling, that's the first question I would ask is, you know, just define for yourself, does this system reflect my beliefs? And if it does, is it the thing that makes me feel best? Because between those two questions, you should be able to understand whether the thing you're doing now is most appropriate for you.
Absolutely.
And from there, then there's secondary things that you would want to think about and that could lead to the beginning of a research project. But that's it.
And, you know, one of the things, so like it's thinking about counter trend trading, limit order trading. One of the things to think about is a lot of people, they like limit order trading. And one of the one thing I would say about that is the more you can better understand a breakout, the strength of a breakout traps counter trend traders. So the kryptonite to a limit order trader is a strong breakout. If you want to verify that, just trade with limit orders and then get trapped on a small pullback trend and keep scaling in against the trend and see how that goes. And so the point with that is, if you really understand strong breakouts, you're going to understand how limit orders work. A limit order trade, you're selling above a bar, scaling in. And if that bar suddenly gets a lot bigger, you've sold, you've increased your risk, you know, you've doubled your position, you're going to lose a lot more than you can make really, really fast. Well, think about that logic on the other side. If you get a sudden breakout bar that traps traders and instead of the market pulling back, it goes even higher, what is that doing? It's trapping a lot of limit order traders. And therefore, if it's trapping a lot of limit order traders, it's great. It's a breakout. It's a great breakout trade. And so one of the things that helps, I think it helps a lot of people, is the more you understand this, what exactly is going on in a breakout, counter trend traders getting trapped, the more eager or willing you're going to be to press on a trade. One of the, people have a natural fear of, it's always funny to me, and everybody goes through this. People have a natural fear of, it's like, I think, people like Tom Hugard always say, buy as the market's going in your direction, or sell as it's going in your direction. Never trade against a trend. People naturally love to scale into a losing position because they think they're getting in, they buy the close, and if they buy more or lower, they're getting in at a valuable price. There's more value. But reality, and what they don't want to do is buy and add on because their risk is getting too big. But really, when you think about a strong breakout, the more you add to the position, as long as your risk is contained and not too large, it's actually a very high probability trade. That's why you hear Al, just go back to the trading room. You can find it at some point if you go, get a couple of months of recordings. You'll hear Al say that one of his number one goals, this is probably 8 or 9 years ago, was to buy the close of every bar in a strong buy the close rally and just keep adding to the position and putting a stop one tick below. The reason is because he understands how high the probability is of the market getting a second leg. And that's why really understanding breakouts and second legs is very, very important. So if there's any, for those of you that have Al's video course, I'd really recommend go back to the breakout section. Watch the breakout section. I think it's like video 15 or 16 or 17. Go back to the how to trade section and watch how to trade breakouts and really think about what he's saying. But if you can understand breakouts, the rest of your trading is going to improve.
Yeah, and that's to that point. That is why Ali starts every reset of PTM with breakouts. PTM's course pedagogy is structured around breakouts for that.
I think if you actually just go to this YouTube channel, there's quite a few videos
there
about
are
breakouts that you can just watch that may give you some ideas as far as just what to do.
And just real quick before we wrap up, Jonathan asked, so what are you saying is that the call is not a selling call? This is the discovery call, but rather a true, let's see if you'll benefit from attending SA2. That is correct. There is no sales. Like we actually don't sign people up on the call, nor do we allow them to submit payments for anything. It's a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mutual benefit. I mean, from just a logistics standpoint, if someone was to just sign up today, if they're not a good fit or they have a wrong impression about what it actually is, it's actually everyone's going to be unhappy, which isn't, I mean, it just, no one benefits in that case. We don't benefit, that person doesn't benefit, the other individuals who signed up don't benefit.
Well, and
it's the same thing actually, even with Ali's live PTM, which is basically, I think $300 a month.
Yeah.
And that's 3 hours a week. So basically once a week for basically once a week, 3-hour session on Saturday. You have to talk to someone named Faisal and actually interview just to make sure that you understand what it is. That's just kind of a overall policy, I would say, of Ali's. But if you do want PTM, there's several recordings.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can go through and get years and years of PTM recordings. But there is no way to, like, we will not sign new students up during a call. It is always a follow-up and a conversation about that, and there's subsequent conversations. So and this is why we always suggest that if someone's interested, just send an email or send an application and just have a conversation. The conversation, even for the students who don't join, is typically meaningful because it helps them define what is most useful right now for them. And it's sometimes hard to define that for yourself without that conversation. So,
and even kind of on a funnier note, there's been a wait list for SA2, and I think Ali just sent the email once to the wait list just to let them know it's open, because I mean, from logistically, we really want people to want to sign up in the first place, because that's what brings the the eagerness and the classroom the setting more enjoyable. We don't want anybody that's unhappy to be there.
Exactly.
Then it just kind of brings everyone else down.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that coming out of the this today, like Brad said, thinking about breakouts, thinking about what makes you feel good when you're in a trade, and where you think you can spend some more time considering your current trading behavior through that lens is probably most useful, because it's the starting point for every subsequent decision, right? If those things aren't clearly defined, written down, and justified, then everything else is unclear as well. It inherits the lack of clarity from the starting point. So we're big on first principles with quant systems, and the first principle is beliefs and breakouts, and beyond that, it's downstream.
And there's one thing I want to say with that. Ashlyn, I may have accidentally sent, that's the SA2 overview, but if you just copy and paste that link and click on courses and then click on PTM, you can find more information about either. So that link will take you there. But as far as beliefs, one of the things, I think that's worth mentioning is, I remember Ali, we were talking with Ali in 2022 in Orlando, And I don't remember exactly what the conversation was, but it had basically to do with one of the biggest problems he sees with people wanting to learn how to trade is their unwillingness to think for a long enough period of time. And Ali, he was telling me a story he'll never forget. This was back in 2013, 2014. Al was spending, he was doing the trading room stuff. He was answering a lot of questions. For those of you who've been around, you remember when you could ask Al, one question on the website every day. And sometimes you could sneak in 2 questions a day and Ken not get mad at you. But the point is he would, Ali would email a question to Al and be like, Al, he'd sent like a 4-page paper to Al about this bar. And he's like, Al, why did this bar happen? Blah, blah, blah. I spent 10 hours studying it and I don't get it. And Al's simple response was, you just have to think about it more. And Ali said it frustrated him to no end until he thought more about it. And all of a sudden, at some point, the light bulb went off. And so why am I saying that? The point is, I think it's fun to want to learn about trading. It's a fun idea. But I think you really have to think about the fact of, do you really want to learn all this? It's a lot of work and a lot of time. And, the reason I say all that is, I think it's really important to, and it's one of the things, it's objectives, it's your goal. Like, why do you want to do all this? There's a great podcast for those of you. So Richard, who helped Al build a website on the Brooks Trading course, if you go to daytradinginsights.com, it's basically a course Richard and Al made of the Brooks Trading course. It's like 6 hours long. I think it's like $50. But there's a really, really good kind of Q&A where Richard asked Al a series of questions. And one of the, I don't remember exactly the question, what the question was, but one of the answers Al gave was, basically, you should not want to trade for a hobby. And, the point with that was, if you're just wanting to trade for that reason or a monetary reason, there's a lot of other great avenues, working at a company or just doing all sorts of things. Real estate, there's all sorts of stuff. So the point with that is what Al was saying, if I can really summarize it really simply, if you really listen to Al, he has an obsession over charts. And I think if you really want to learn, if you really want to understand trading, you really have to find that fascination of it. And if it's not there, if it's only been a year and it's not really there, maybe it takes a little bit of time. But if you're just doing something because you don't really want to do it, that's probably a good sign to think about something else. That's just, the reality is, whether I've talked to Al, I've talked to Ali, I've met them both at a conference. And when you really sit down and hear them, they have a fascination about charts and trading. Same for anyone, same for James. I think you really have to be fascinated about the topic. Because there's a lot of people, I've had plenty of people that applied to SA2 who, they've watched half the course, but they've had half the video course of Al's, but they've had the video course for 2.5 years. And it kind of brings up the question of, is this really something they want to do? But overall, number one thing is just, I would challenge you, if you have the breakout white paper about Lee's, crack it open on the weekend and just think about it. You'll always get an answer thinking.
Indeed. It's a good place to wrap up, I think. Take
sure.
some time and think about it. And
even think about a trading idea. What's a, for those of you that I want to think I can do this on my own, which people are capable. What's a trading idea? I'd be really interested to hear even a trading idea, a system, one that they think they could build, and if they could really figure out all the pitfalls.
Well, why doesn't if anyone has any systems that they're proposing, just drop them in the chat. See if anyone responds. This is if you're not going to be joining us for Systems Academy, propose an idea in the chat and see if anyone
maybe we'll talk about it next time we're on.
Yeah,
critique it a little bit.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, it was great to catch up, and we'll talk to y'all soon. I'll be jumping on later tonight to talk about a study habit and a method for dealing with lack of time and how to kind of consolidate efforts. But so the more research and study specific kind of habits. But in any case, that's coming. But Brad and I will be doing some more of these in the coming weeks, hopefully a bit more frequently, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Until then, and the white papers just go to the Quant Systems website. You'll find it somewhere there.
Yeah, the link above, you can get it there.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining.
All right. Have a great day. Talk to you later.